Today's youth need teachers, volunteers, and most of all, well, they need you. I'm Doug Edwards, and I'm going to be talking with real youth mentors and students to give you the knowledge you need to be the best youth worker possible. This is Youth Worker on Fire. So I got a voicemail, and in this voicemail, it was from Jim Halstead, who I talked about in the last episode. And the last episode was You Are Not Meant to Do This Alone, the hidden team behind every youth worker. And so if you've listened to that, then you will be interested in this voicemail that came in concerning not being alone. We talked about God of the angel armies, and that he is the force behind you. We talked about the book that talks about 1,500 near-death experiences, or in some cases, death experiences where they came back to life, and their encounters with God, and the similarities. And angels, 3 angels per person were some of the similarities that showed up the most. And you can go back and listen to that to find this. But Jim Halstead had a response to that because of one of the authors that we talked about, and he'll mention his name in that particular episode. So let me play Jim's response to you now, and then we'll talk about this a little bit more.
Hey, Doug, Jim Halstead. Hey, listen to your podcast. You did say it accurately, and it was a great blessing to listen. I love that book from John, and also Lee Strobel's, he has one that talks about heaven as well. And in John's book, he talks about Howard Storm. He was the art professor who died, was going to hell, asked Jesus, God forgave him, and he left the art professor world, got into a pastorate. Anyway, after I read Howard's book years ago, I reached out to him. We've had several meals together. I taught Go and Tell at his church. He actually gave me some of his paintings. He tells a story after he came back from heaven and Jesus changing him, and he came back from Paris after he died and came back. He went to church, and his wife was not a believer, ended up divorcing him and kept the kids away from him. But anyway, he wanted to go to church, so he went by a nearby church by his house, and she kept saying, "Don't embarrass me, don't embarrass me." And when he stepped in the church, when he looks up when the worship started, he literally saw angels. A few angels worshiping above the worship team. And he goes, I didn't know what to do, but I figured if they were worshiping and I'm in the presence of angels, I should bow before the Lord. So he got in the aisle and he bowed. When he did that, his wife thought he got hurt, and the elders and deacons came running up, thought he was falling, and they're trying to lift him up, and he's fighting them, trying to stay down to worship. And then his wife starts yelling, realizing because he's talking about the angels, and she goes, "You're embarrassing me. You're embarrassing me." So anyway, great story about the angels. I was blessed to meet Howard, consider him a friend. And I'm blessed to consider you a friend. Love you, brother. Do well. Thanks for mentioning me. I'm humbled by it.
So there you have a response. Now, I love it when you guys respond like that. And it's not that I can use every one that comes in, but I love to hear from every one of you. Whether you leave a voice message on our email, or if you have my phone number, you leave a voice message there, or text. We love to hear from you and what's happening. But in response to that, you're not alone with whatever you're doing. I will tell you this. There were times that I was just so frustrated getting ready to go to a student ministry meeting, whether for high school, middle school, or college. And I'd had all my stuff lined up. We'd had the topics that we're going to cover weeks ahead, and we'd get a monthly calendar out. But there's times it just wasn't coming together. It was so frustrating. And I have a tendency to be late to things. And so what I learned to do is to always go up and finish whatever preparation up in the gym, or go early to the home that we were going to be in, because we'd do many meetings in homes. Usually it was a spiritual warfare, a spiritual battle when things weren't coming together, but it was time for the meeting. And the times that I let myself stay in my office too long, not be up there quite on time, would frustrate my staff. I didn't do it often because I knew I had that tendency, but when I would just finally say, okay, God, whatever it is that you've got it. I'm out of here. And then I'd show up on time and not even being completely prepared, but being as prepared as God allowed me to be. I would find that he had changed up things and had already had things in place that he wanted to do. Now, if you ever listen to a guy by the name of Pastor Stanley, who was First Baptist Church of Atlanta, he talks about there's a period of time where he would show up. He was always well prepared ahead of time. And it's Andy Stanley's dad, who's also a pastor in north part of Atlanta. His dad would say, I was always prepared. But there was one time when I said, God, now you always showed up and I always had my sermon ready to go. And we would share, because he was also in a TV ministry. He was worldwide as well as there at the church. And he said, but you've always promised me you'd show up, and there is nothing. You've given me nothing for this week, and so I'm expecting you to show up. And he said, sure enough, I showed up that Sunday, and God kept feeding me line after line after line. I don't know what your situation is. I think God treats us according to what our needs are. Me, I needed to prepare more ahead. And Pastor Stanley, he needed to sometimes just realize God's got this, whether you've got it or not. He handles us differently and checks our trust level and faith level in different ways. And for me, it was to show up when I could not get things together, no matter how frustrated I was. And usually my frustration was a sign that there's a spiritual war going on and that God had something better in mind. So as you listen, you might want to listen again to what Jim Halstead said in his voicemail to remind you that angels are all around. Now, he sent me a part of the chapter of this guy's book, Howard Storm, who John Burke talked about in his book, Imagine Heaven. 1,500 people who had near-death experiences and came back to tell about their experience in heaven and with angels and with God. One of the chapters he sent me just said, I want you to get a feel for this, that he told you about. But this is something interesting for us, that there are churches of different types. They said, I searched and couldn't figure out which church to go to after I had this encounter with God and near-death experience, and I was still recovering, and I just couldn't find the church, and something happened, and we decided to go to the church that's only a mile from us. He said, first I found this church, though, that was non-denominational. He said in the book, this indicated to me that this church was not materialistic, since it didn't own property. Now, there's some truth to that, too. Look at Saddleback Church. It was the church that if you could find us, you could worship with us. They did that until they had 10,000 people that were attending their church, and that was for many years. He said God would surely, and I'm saying that, here's back to the book, God would surely be present in a non-materialistic church. On Sunday morning, with much effort, I got cleaned up and dressed in a suit and tie, and off we went to church 15 miles away, a choice based solely on the fact that it didn't own property. When we got there, we couldn't locate where the church met in the sprawling elementary school complex, and there wasn't a soul around. Now, I've been to some of those churches like that, except I haven't been to one that was closed, but I would have been frustrated, and I understand churches pretty well. Eventually, we found a small note on a locked door that read, closed for the summer, reopening in September. Totally discouraged, we went home. I blamed God for this failure. How could God let me go to a church that didn't exist? It had been a momentous decision for me to attend church for the first time in my adult life. Now, can you imagine the things that people feel that have never been to church before, and they go to our churches, the things they see? God is the God of the angel armies, and he talks about not only were there a few angels at that church that he went to when they finally went there, Christ Church, he said, but there were over 100 angels is what he said in this chapter that he was seeing. And of course, he did embarrass his wife and different things like that, but he was so overwhelmed because he had never experienced church before. And then he experiences God before he experiences church and the angels. And his thought was, if they're worshiping, I need to be worshiping. And he sprawled out, and he was sick. He was still sick. Be kind to the people that show up to your church that seem new. Be kind to the students as if they know nothing. I've told you about my encounter with a student down in South Lake County, and she had me meet with her. And she looked like every Christian student, and she said, "I want to meet with you sometime." I said, So we met at McDonald's before school that week, and she said, "I don't know who God is. We never went to church. My parents said it was too confusing. They went to different denominations. They didn't want to confuse us, so they figured we'd figure it out when we got older." She says, "I'm embarrassed. I don't know anything about Christmas. I don't know anything about Easter. Could you help me? Could you teach me? Because I am embarrassed to know that I don't know these things and my friends do." After a couple of meetings, she prayed to ask Jesus into her heart. Never have been to church before. If she had, she went to friends. And you'll hear these stories over and over and over. Thank you, Jim Halstead, for writing back and letting me know about your knowledge of a guy by the name of Howard Storm and his experience, and that was written also in John Burke's book. Thank you guys for listening to Youth Worker on Fire. We'd love to hear from you at youthworkeronfire@gmail.com. We'd love to know that you're having experiences, that God is showing you things through us that maybe he hasn't shown you anywhere else, or that you're at least feeling encouraged by us in some way. Thanks again. We'll see you next time on Youth Worker on Fire.
You've been listening to the Youth Worker on Fire podcast. If you like what you hear, please subscribe and tell your friends. Also, leave a comment and tell us what you think. Stay tuned for more informative episodes.